In 2021, video game sales passed $200 billion, and some reports think the industry could be worth north of $300 billion in the next few years. For some context here, the global film industry plus all 4 major US sports combined don't come close to the money being made in gaming. Like many of you, I played way too many video games over the course of the pandemic, and I got obsessed with gaming again. So let's talk about the business of gaming and more specifically esports. For all the noobs out there, esports is really just organized competitive video gaming that's broadcasted to an audience. More than 1/3 of the people in the world play video games. They typically skew young, they're very engaged online, and they're hungry for content around the game or streamer that they love.
Energy still around, Justin is there for the shot, Justin! This is Rocket League!
But esports orgs and leagues that have millions of dollars invested in them can't seem to raise revenue, let alone generate a profit. So what are the problems with esports, and why can't they capture an audience that is hungry for gaming content? Around 2015-2016, users watching esports broadcasts was a large portion of Twitch's viewership. So Twitch, the live streaming service, invested in it. They formed business relationships with a few organizations, and they sold brand deals for them. At this point, the only way these teams were really making money were through sponsorships, and now suddenly they had this injection of capital from Twitch.
I'm rich.
So naturally, the teams used this money to diversify, and they picked up teams that played other games competitively and slowly evolved from a single esports team into a larger esports organization. Some of these orgs grew very, very fast. They now had more players, more teams, more coaches, and more overhead. Then, in 2017, a company called Riot Games, who already had a successful esports league built around their game League of Legends, announced that they would be shifting their North American league to a franchise model, meaning already struggling teams would need to pay $10 million to be a part of their championship series. So now the teams that are already unable to grow revenue or generate profit need more money from investors.
Please, sir, I want some more.
The majority of teams from 2017 to 2018 were sold to traditional sports teams or the owners of those teams. And they certainly saw an opportunity to grab a younger, more engaged demographic, something that traditional sports across the board is struggling with.
Am I so out of touch? No. It's the children who are wrong.
Then, in 2018, Activision Blizzard decided to create an esports league based on a widely successful game they'd released a few years before called Overwatch. Shout out to my OG Overwatch players. I've logged thousands of hours in that game, and it's taken away from my life.
I'm just a loser who's good at old video games.
So the Overwatch League, or OWL, comes along using the city-based franchise model to try and build localized fan bases, much like traditional sports. And they pitch investors using Morgan Stanley research that predicted the league could earn up to $720 million per year. They end up selling all their team slots for $20 million each, and Twitch buys the broadcast rights from Activision Blizzard for 2 years at $90 million. Seems like a good start, right? But now the stakes are high, and the teams are incredibly reliant on the league's overall success. So what are the problems? Well, it's a little complicated. Most esports leagues are trying to replicate things that are successful in traditional sports, but gaming and esports are so inherently different. Traditional sports are fairly simple to understand on a base level, and outside of nuanced rules, they never really change drastically. My wife, who has no interest in sports, will have some sense of what's going on if I have football or basketball on. If I have the Overwatch League Grand Finals on, my wife would have no clue what the was happening.
Whoops, and a headshot on the Tio, the backhand on Edison, and then the finish on the Sparker and Hodman? Who is this man?
So the entry point for a viewer into esports is much more complicated and fragmented than traditional sports. For a gamer to go from a player of a game to a consistent viewer of the esport, they need to be obsessed with the game to the point where they can't get enough of it. Plus, traditional sports like basketball, football, and baseball are always played IRL, and the way they're broadcasted has been worked on and perfected for years. Esports only exist in the digital world, and the way they're broadcasted can be confusing and tough to follow, even for people that play the game on a daily basis. Plus, the nuances of the already existing game are constantly changing because of updates from the game developer. Certain things in-game can become more or less powerful, new characters are introduced, new maps are released. Can you imagine if the NFL said, next season, all our games will be played in a parking lot, and you can't have running backs anymore? Or if the NBA said, LeBron James is just too good, and he needs to play with a blindfold on and one arm tied behind his back. Also, video games just don't have the same longevity that traditional sports do. Developers and publishers are constantly evolving to take advantage of new technology and to give gamers new options and variety. So what happens when a new game comes around and starts stealing a player base from an already existing game that has an esports league built around it? Does the esports league just disappear? So the teams are reliant on the league's overall success, and the leagues are reliant on the game's longevity. The other thing that is so vastly different from traditional sports is that players on these esports teams have an alternative path for success. Streaming on Twitch or YouTube, where they have more freedom, they can still get sponsored and partner with big brands, all from their own home. Plus, some of these streamers are better or just as good at a game as the players on the pro esports teams are.
This looks so stupid.
But they prefer to take the independent streaming route, something that would never happen in the NFL or NBA or MLB. Imagine if Tom Brady started broadcasting himself practicing in his backyard and it got more viewers than a Sunday night football game. Or if an NBA team left the league and started broadcasting 5 versus 5 pickup games. It would just never happen. Broadcast rights are the main way any revenue at all has come out of esports, and consistent viewership for most of these esports broadcasts just isn't there right now, even for the most popular games. So why would companies like Twitch and YouTube buy pricey broadcast rights to esports leagues that don't pull consistent audience numbers? Now, some people will point to impressive viewership numbers for certain League of Legends tournaments, Fortnite tournaments, or Overwatch League matchups, but a large portion of esports viewers are international, and monetizing international viewers is very complex, especially for leagues that struggle to monetize their domestic viewers.
It's very complicated.
Plus, sponsorship dollars are dropping for all esports teams as ad spend typically declines when the word recession is thrown around so much. The other sticking point is that the game publishers often run the esports league that's built around the game that they created, and they take money right off the top. In 2020, Activision Blizzard took 50% of revenue that the Overwatch League generated, and Riot Games takes 32.5% of revenue that the League Championship Series generates. And they of course also make a ton of money from sales of the game itself or in-game microtransactions. So are they really incentivized to make these teams money, or is it just a big commercial for the game they're trying to sell anyway? There also seems to be a disconnect between the community of gamers and the people running these esports leagues. There's somebody playing Call of Duty in almost every house in America, but how many of them can name a top player in the Call of Duty League, or even a team in the Call of Duty League?
Next question, please.
I think most gamers, myself at least, feel that the corporations running these leagues have little interest in the game itself or the people playing it, and more interest in making money. Gamers have typically been seen as outcasts and people that found an online community that embraced them, and now it kind of feels like the big companies with lots of cash are coming in and destroying the thing that we love. There's also a certain level of schadenfreude in gaming. If a new version of whatever game comes out and isn't well received, gamers kind of want to see it fail. And they'll create content about how bad the game is and how terrible the game developers are.
Hey, EA! Your game sucks!
All right.
So if fans aren't pleased with the latest release of Overwatch or Call of Duty, insert game here, chances are they're probably not tuning in to see the pros play it. So what are the solutions? I don't know. I'm just a dude that loves video games, but I think a pretty good place to start is embracing the highly engaged gaming community that so badly wants content around the game they love. Maybe an open circuit model for esports tournaments where players from around the world could compete in the esports leagues if they're good enough, of course. I also think not acting like a traditional sports league and acting more as its own different digital thing will go a long way. Again, I don't really know what that means.
I don't know what that means.
All I know is if I were a gaming company or a potential investor, I'd want to figure out a way to capitalize on this potential $300 billion industry. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and please hit that subscribe button with notifications on so you know anytime we drop a new video. We'll see you next time.